You're listening to Bootstrapped Bossin by James Alexander, a mini-series showcasing some successful Irish bootstrap businesses. You won't find these CEOs perched on rooftops, smiling for a press release. They're in the engine room, making the hard decisions to achieve sustainable growth.
So I'm delighted to be joined today by Alan Meaney. Alan is the co-founder and CEO of Fundrex, a data and reconciliation software for the financial services industry, joining us from New York. So Alan, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
I'm great, James. Great to chat to you. Looking forward to the podcast.
Thanks. Now, look, I've obviously given you just the high-level intro, but do you want to maybe tell us a bit more about Fundrex and who you are?
Sure, yeah, I can give it an overview. So we're a B2B fintech company based out of Ireland, but with offices in New York, Dubai, and Australia. And we help our customers automate reconciliations and their data integrations. So really what we try and do is turn their business users into data superheroes, as we like to say. So if folks that, traditionally weren't software developers but have to deal with a lot of data, we give them the tools to automate those workflows using our no-code platform. And that's delivered as a cloud solution hosted on Amazon Web Services, and we deliver it as a SaaS platform. So very much trying to create efficiency, automation, oversight, governance, that type of stuff.
Okay, cool. And how was Fundrex born? I know you've got a couple of co-founders, but do you want to maybe give us a bit of that background?
Sure. We so three co-founders, myself, Des, and Padraig. We started off as a different solution. We were building a collaboration platform called Task Messenger. And we did that as a side project for about 18 months. We got a version live. Myself and Padraig went full-time on it. Got about 3,000 free users using it. And the simple idea was it was kind of like a Trello to-do list for teams before there was Trello. So it's kind of building your tasks out as cards and being able to make those public and gamify the teamwork element of it. So we got that up and running. Myself and Padraig were a couple of months into working on it. And a friend of Des, our third co-founder, asked, could we take that consumer UI and UX approach that we're doing for tasks and apply it to automating reconciliations for the funds industry? So we thought, well, here's a really interesting problem that we know really well and a pain that we've experienced ourselves and is still an ongoing challenge for some of our customers. And we thought, well, in Dublin, there's a natural cluster of companies that we could sell to. And those companies would be large financial services institutions, potentially willing to pay us, a six-figure sum a year. So we thought we'd have an unfair advantage in that. So in a kind of classic cliched startup pivot, we built out a prototype for that, got some feedback from the initial prospect. They really liked it. They wanted to move ahead. They'd just been acquired by a large Japanese bank, so we couldn't do anything for a couple of months. So I took that prototype and started demoing it to potential customers in Dublin that were fund administrators. One of those ended up signing a couple of months later and being our first customer. So that was Capita Asset Services, and then MUFG were the initial prospect that reached out. So there were two kind of founding customers. So with the two of those on board, myself and Padraig got busy trying to build the first version of Fundrex. We hired our first two software developers out of Waterford. Padraig was originally working out of a spare room, and once he realized we couldn't have people come in and work with him in his house, we moved into ARC Labs, which is part of Waterford Institute Technology.
Yeah.
And that was really us up and running and off to the races, trying to get a first version of a product out to customers. So it wasn't some strategic masterstroke by us realizing here's an industry we can solve problems for with software. It was more folks coming to us with problems and us working back from the problems to try and deliver them a solution that would work for them.
Yeah. So when you say folks coming to you, you must have, I suppose, been quite well known within the funds industry beforehand, to kind of get that traction before even having a product.
Yeah, I guess I was working in for 10 years, my co-founder for 15. We had a decent network. I think half of it was more, it was a problem that really needed to be solved quickly for people. I wouldn't say that it was they reached out to us first. I think we were just in the right time, or right place at the right time, really. Bit of luck on our side with it. And it was, if you remember, this was the early days of AWS where very few financial service firms actually put their data in the cloud. So this is like 2014, 2015 when we went live with the first customers. So even back then, it was a bit of a challenge to convince them as institutions that it was safe from a security perspective to do this. And then their IT teams had to get on board. So we were probably very early to the platform that we delivered in terms of the architecture, and all the benefits that brings with it, being a SaaS and being able to deliver regular updates, and the clients not having to worry about the IT side of it. So for those, and SaaS model itself, pay as you go type model was really new as well at that stage for enterprise. So those few factors combined kind of got us over the line with the first two customers. And really, I guess what we benefit from was our understanding of the problem, having kind of lived the pain points ourselves day to day. And we pitched our vision for how this could be solved for the industry at the time, and got a couple of customers, luckily enough, that were willing to back us with that vision, and that's how we got up and running.
Yeah, great. But I suppose, it sounds like you went from customer funded or self-funded to customer funded pretty quickly. And, the theme of this podcast is around bootstrap businesses. I know you're going to say you're not quintessentially bootstrap, but I mean, businesses that haven't taken on the institutional investment route. How did you kind of manage at the start? I'm sure you had bills to pay yourself and Des, but how did you kind of manage to quit the day job and go all in on this without sacrificing too much?
Yeah, so early days was all about being scrappy. It was kind of trying to find any sort of bit of funding, grants, Enterprise Ireland. Padraig had some success with the Young Entrepreneur of the Year. He won that in Waterford, went on to the regional finals. That came with like a €15,000 check. So scraping together those type of small bits of funds just to get that small team up and running at the start. I don't think we could probably do as much as we did then with the same amount of money now. It's just more expensive across the board. About hiring people, and on the hosting side is more expensive, and on the software development side it costs more. But yeah, it was just trying to find how do we extend our runway to getting that first customer live and getting that first invoice out the door. And really that was our laser focus. And I guess as a small startup selling to large financial institutions, we were looking for any sort of credibility that we could acquire. So, Padraig winning that award, us getting on to the accelerator that we did in Dublin, all helped build that profile of credibility that allowed us to get the first customer signed. You just have to figure out whatever it takes really in the early days, and it just feels so slow. But you hit those milestones, and when you reflect on them, they're huge milestones. But at the time, it just feels like another big challenge.
And how long were your sales cycles? Because I know from recruitment, dealing with financial services, even that process can take a long time. But how long till you kind of saw revenue from actually?
So I'd say we probably 6 months, like initial conversations to first invoice was probably a year, but bear in mind we had to build the first version of the product in between. So we had to get a version up and running and get them live into production, and haven't had a parallel period in UAT in the middle. So I'd say first conversations to like, we want to do something here, to actually issuing the first invoice was definitely no shorter than 12 months. And then the sales cycle itself, a typical average would be about 6 months. We have over the years signed some in a few weeks. We've signed some that we've been talking to for 4 years. So like the end-to-end spectrum is quite broad, but on average, it's about, I'd say 6 months.
Okay. So like yourself and Des, you weren't technical co-founders. You obviously needed, funding to obviously pay your own bills, but you then had to build a product. How did you kind of go about that in terms of building that MVP, and was that easy, or I'm guessing not?
It was easy for me because I didn't build it, but all the hard work was done by Padraig, our technical co-founder. So I guess
when did he come in then? When did Padraig come in?
So while we were still working on Task Messenger as an idea and a concept, we're like, myself and Des quickly realized we weren't technical enough to build a scalable web app. And we started kind of trying to think, who do we know that we could pull in to get a first version of this together? And Padraig was dating Des' sister at the time. They're now happily married with children. And so we kind of wrote Padraig in. He said, okay, sounds like a cool idea. So then we just kind of moved on as equal partners, the three of us. It was just an idea at that stage. And Padraig built out the first version of Task Messenger. And then when the company came and spoke to us about reconciliations, he built the first version of that. So, having, a co-founding team that can share the burden, and, a technical co-founder is obviously a huge advantage because you can get that first version of your product built. Was a big help for us. Like, we probably wouldn't have got there without Padraig's commitment to it, because, it's very hard to take a concept from idea to working prototype if you don't have a technical person to build it on your team. It often comes up in conversation where we'll have non-technical founders with an idea, and they'll ask us, about our experience, and share how it worked out for us. And they'll say, well, we're going to work with an agency to build the first version, which can be a stepping stone, but it's very difficult to then come back and make rapid iterations on that based on customer feedback, because you have to keep going back to the agency, and you just create an extra layer of confusion. It's hard enough as a development team to take user requirements and turn them into features. When you've got a couple of layers to manage on that, it becomes really difficult to get it right.
Yeah. Well, lucky that you sort of had Padraig anyway, because I think that's when non-technical founders have their idea and they want to start. That's why they kind of get driven to wanting to seek funding straight away, because as you said, to bring in technical capabilities is quite expensive now, as it would have been compared to 2014.
Yeah, it is. And like the way I look at it is you're building a software platform. So if you can have that technical expertise in your DNA, you really should. Most startups these days will have a strong technical element to it, some form or other, even if it is a, offline product, there'll be a big technical back end to it, or, it could be a hardware product where you need the expertise. Having that in the founding team is usually valuable. So, I'd always encourage people to, I think 3 is probably the most I'd go in terms of co-founders. 2 works well. 1, it's extremely difficult because when you're on your own and you're riding the emotional roller coaster of a startup, it's very hard to navigate it. And that's the biggest challenge oftentimes, is just keeping going, and having co-founders to bounce off and, pick you up when things aren't going well, or to calm you down, not let you get too excited when something's gone really well. It helps manage that. And, without that, you can run into issues like burnout, or, most of the time startups die from just giving up. And if you have a co-founder that you've committed to, it's very hard to just give up.
Yeah, fair enough. And what about Enterprise Ireland then? You mentioned them earlier in terms of the funding. I think you said you were a HPSU business, but how much help were they for you at the start? And are they still a support for you?
Yeah, so Enterprise Ireland have been really helpful. We did HSBSU, which has obviously changed now to convertible note, a much better format. When we did it, it was €50,000 for 10% equity, and the founders put in 5,000 themselves, which
that sounds like a lot from an equity perspective.
These days, it's very expensive. Back when we took it, and there was very little alternative. It was the quickest way for us to get the funding in to keep the lights on effectively. Like we had another option. We probably that had better terms, we would have went for it. But that was, and one part of it was that we had one eye on, okay, we'll do HSBSU with angels afterwards, which we went on to do after the CSF. So it was a pathway towards that, where we raised more money with them. So like historically, we've raised just under €1 million, and half of that is probably equally split between Enterprise Ireland and angel investors. So we have a group of 15 or 16 angel investors that have put in checks individually. So the EI path has worked well for us. It's allowed us to get up and running, and grow the team and get the customers in. And like you said earlier, most of our expansion has been customer funded. We haven't raised money since 2018. But yeah, EI has been hugely helpful. We're working with them on R&D grants and other stuff as well, key person grants. So, they've definitely stepped up to the mark when we've needed them. Now, obviously, their mandate is to create jobs in Ireland, which we've done a pretty good job at doing, and export-driven stuff. And obviously, we work a lot in the regions in terms of employment. So we kind of tick out the boxes for their goals. So we lean on them a little bit. I think, the new format they're doing is really encouraging. I think a lot of founders will be looking at that now as a path towards getting up and running.
Yeah, I saw you post about it actually a couple of weeks ago, I think. Yeah. What's that one about exactly?
So that CSF that we took, which was the 50K for 10%, they've changed that now for the same program. It's a 100K convertible loan note. So they're not setting a valuation. So if you think about it, back when we took it, the valuation of the business was set at 500,000.
Which is it's a bit of a slap in the face, isn't it?
Well, it's it doesn't really matter too much, but it's more planning the lifetime of a startup in terms of have equity available to give away for future rounds.
Yeah,
so you can hamstring yourself quite quickly. Like if you think, okay, if I give 10% away to EI, then I raise a small angel round, quite quickly, like you can be up to 20 or 30% of equity given away, having raised very little money relative to maybe what US startups might raise for the equivalent amount. So it's a downstream impact, and startups then run into issues where founders will be watered down significantly by the time they get to the Series A or Series B, which isn't ideal. So it's trying to find the balance in between. And I think the convertible loan note just, defers any valuation to later on when there's institutional investors investing in the business and they can put a valuation on it. And it just gives much more flexibility.
Great. And then look, in terms of angels, you mentioned, I think 14 or 15 angels that you sort of had up until 2018. How did you go about that process? And, was it hard, or was it friends and family starting off and then expanding from that?
Yeah, it was, it was just reaching out to different folks, a lot of industry folks we actually got in. So people working in the funds industry, we were speaking to them about what we were doing. And, we went through the Waiver Accelerator, which was great. That had a demo day at the end of it, so we could connect in with investors at that. And then, it was just pitching to anyone that we could get an introduction to. So trying to leverage your network and saying, do you know any investors that are active at the moment that would be interested in backing a startup in this area? So we went through all those types of introductions and paths, and scrambled people together for small rounds. So 125k from angels, 125k for EI, and then another 12 months later doing the same thing again. So yeah, it was challenging. I think it's starting to get better in Ireland. We're starting to see more entrepreneurs that have exited that are coming back to make angel investments. So there's a lot more there, but there could be there's a lot of room for improvement. I think we haven't quite hit the critical mass we need to really grow the industry in Ireland, but hopefully in the next few years with a few more exits, we'll be there.
And how does that happen, that critical mass? Is that just people having the actual funds to invest?
Yeah. Like, it's having the free money to invest. Like, I see opportunities for angel investment all the time, and I have no free cash to invest. Everything is buried into Fundrex. So until we have an exit event, I just won't have the money to do it. So I think it just comes down to people with because, like, realistically, when you're angel investing, it should be a very, very small portion of your net worth. Now, typically, founders end up throwing that rule book out the window and invest way larger amounts than they probably should if you were looking at it from an investment advice perspective. And most of the time, it's because they enjoy doing it. They like supporting other founders and want to see other people doing well. So it's not often financially driven investment. And they know they can have an effect either through introductions or mentoring those founders themselves. So I think we've seen a lot of Irish startup entrepreneurs reinvesting in the industry. I think that will continue to grow, but we're not quite at the point where there's a full network there where we get the same impact that you would in the US or the UK.
Okay. And what about the EIIS scheme? I mean, do you know much about that?
Yeah, we've had a couple of our investors over the years have used it successfully. It's kind of up for review at the moment, and I know Scale Ireland are doing a bunch of work trying to propose a better version of it. And Brian Caulfield in particular has led that effort. But there's be a bit more work to be done on it. It can be, paper heavy, and the process isn't great from a startup perspective. But it is a great benefit to investors. If you can get a tax benefit through making these risky investments, it's much better than putting it into property where there's not really the upside for the economy.
Yeah. Okay. And in the first 4 years, then, up until your latest kind of the last time you took funding, I should say, were there points where you, Des, and Padraig sat down and said, right, we should really kind of consider institutional investment here?
Yeah, it's an open question that we're always discussing, and we speak to investors pretty regularly. So the way we kind of pitch it is we have strong opinions loosely held in that we have particular milestones we know we want to get to in terms of the business, be it customer, product, revenue. And then we can work out, well, how quick can we get there with the customer funding? And, is there an opportunity cost to not take an investment to get there faster? So that's really the equation that we work back from. And then outside of that, it's trying to find the right investors to work with to share our vision for the product that we'd enjoy working with, that we want to be successful on behalf of. Because ultimately, when you do have a successful outcome with a startup, you make your investors money, and you want to make the right people money if you can. So luckily, we have a great bunch of angel investors, and we can find the right institutional investors with the right LPs, that we'd be happy to be successful with. And that would be a big part of it. And then, for us, it's how can we get the problem solved that we want to solve, which is the data side of it and the reconciliation side of it. Can we do that with customer funding? Does the investment make more sense? So yeah, it's, the market has changed a lot in the last 6 months. On the investment side, the bubble has burst a bit with the zero interest rates dropping off, and you've seen it, throughout the economy, and you've seen it in the public markets, and you've seen it in crypto. Everywhere has been impacted, and really last 24 months, the VC market just overheated completely. Valuations got crazy. Very little due diligence was done in businesses. Thankfully now, profit and sensible growth is back in vogue all of a sudden.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought a profit-making business is actually important? So yeah, definitely the way investors are looking at businesses has changed. A couple of months just speaking to other founders that are actively fundraising. Yeah. Some investors are taking meetings but aren't writing checks, which isn't ideal for founders because you're wasting time sometimes with investors that can't actually pull the trigger. So it's a bit of a choppy market to navigate at the moment for raising money. But I think it's good overall because the focus is returned to business fundamentals and building a sustainable business, and it's not growth at all cost with zero margin or negative margin.
Yeah. So on the point of sustainable business, like the last 2 years in particular have been mad, where you've got the big techs, the Facebooks and Amazons, and then every Series A onwards company all paying the same amount of crazy salaries out there. And then you've got businesses like you in between that are profitable, but obviously you would become unsustainable if you were paying those salaries. How have you managed, and have you had challenges retaining people when salaries inflated? But how's that been?
Yeah, so it's been a challenge. Like for us, I guess where we've competed is on, employee equity. We've competed on other benefits outside of direct salary. We've competed on culture of the business, so how we operate as a business, how we support our team. They're the kind of main ones. And then we probably naturally benefited from, having a lot of the team outside of high cost centers like Dublin. So like our development team obviously has been remote for the last couple of years, but organically would have, been clustered around Waterford and WIT, which, although, it's catching up in terms of the cost of living, historically has been significantly cheaper than Dublin. So that has benefited us. And that was just a coincidence of Padraig being based down there and then building the office up from down there. And then, probably more recently, we've kind of given the flexibility to the team to be remote. So we've had people join the team from multiple different locations, or even people from Ireland move to other locations and stay working with Fundrex.
Okay.
So I guess, trying to foster a culture where people feel valued, where they can do good work and see it acknowledged, and then have an opportunity to grow. They've been, I guess, our main selling points.
Yeah,
for attracting people.
Well, we spoke a few weeks ago. I think you mentioned you were kind of, hiring someone in marketing probably for the first time at that sort of head off level. And 8 years in, you look at other businesses that are 2 years and have marketing teams of sort of 25 to 30. How did you kind of balance that at the start in terms of ensuring you were growing, but doing it yourselves?
Yeah, so I guess with most startups, especially B2B ones, a lot of the early sales are founder-led sales.
Yeah.
So, the founder literally pitching to a room of people saying, this is our vision for the business, understanding the problem that you have in your business, and these are the ways that we can help you solve it. And, them taking a punt on you. Like our early customers, thankfully, with Capital Asset Services in particular, they had used a startup previously that had been very successful with them. So that kind of paved the way a little bit for us to go in and for them to have the confidence to go to their board of directors and say, listen, this is very similar to the last one that we worked with, solving this problem, and this is how the last project went successfully. So I guess without that, it would have been an even bigger struggle. But yeah, the founder-led sales early on, doing as much as you can yourselves, convincing investors, prospects, employees, that's really what gets you off the ground. And then, to be honest, we're way too late hiring a marketing person. We've left it longer than we probably should have. I probably would have hired it earlier if I could, but there's a long list of projects for that person when they come on board.
Yeah, good. But you've done very well as a business, in terms of organic marketing, and I suppose just creating a community through what that you've run. But can you maybe talk about that? Because I think that's something that's often overlooked but I get the feeling you really enjoy that part of the job.
Yeah, so we were obviously being scrappy and trying to figure out, well, how do we do marketing on a shoestring budget? And part of it was we found events that we ran ourselves very successful in terms of broadening our networks. And when you look at B2B sales, generally you close deals that are either folks that are in your network or one connection removed from your network. So when we were thinking about how do we scale our sales, the way we looked at it was, well, we just scale our network and the sales will follow. So that was the kind of strategy that we went for. And then that kind of organically led to us doing evening events in Dogpatch Labs where we just had folks in to speak for 10 minutes each, and we did pizza and beers afterwards. And then that evolved into us doing Adminovate with Pete Townsend. And that's our annual conference that we run in Trinity College. It's been very successful for us. But really, that's just given us a platform to connect people together. So whether it's speakers talking to each other, attendees that don't get a chance to come to many networking events, they get a venue to come and connect to people. That's been probably the main success that we've had with it. And in the back of that, then people get to know you, get to trust you, and then business deals tend to follow.
Yeah, because I remember going to my first Adminovate, and I think what struck me was when you had the company exhibitions as you walked into Trinity, a lot of them could have been probably classified as your competitors. Is it something to do with the funds industry in particular, where people are very much, I suppose, collaborative, even if you might be competitors?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I've seen multiple examples of it where sometimes people that could be considered competitors come together and do a joint initiative or joint event. Like oftentimes we're sharing the same customer base and we're trying to solve problems for those customers, and working together is a lot easier than working against each other. I think, sometimes I think the more open you are, the more opportunities come your way. You just have to acknowledge, well, maybe I'll get burnt once or twice along the way. And once you're happy with that cost of it, I found it's much easier, one less thing to worry about than worrying about being paranoid about, someone stealing your idea or someone stealing a prospect off you. Like there's enough to be worrying about running a startup than having to have that carried with you as well.
Yeah. And would you say that you've kind of closed the deal through Adminovate?
Yeah, it's definitely helped us close deals. Like when you try and do a post-mortem on a deal and you work back from how did we get from first introduction to, the contract signed, there's normally, 15 plus touch points. Now, Adminovate might have been 2 or 3 of those touch points of the 15. It mightn't necessarily been the one that, tipped it over the line. But when you add everything else up together, it plays a big part in it. So we found it usually helpful. And we run it as a not-for-profit conference. We mostly just spend our time on it, to be honest. And now that we've done it a few years, it's taken less and less time each year that we do it. It's when we look at a conference spend or conference calendar, oftentimes it's way more valuable than attending 2 or 3 other conferences and having an exhibition stand at them at probably 4 or 5 times the cost of us running Adminovate ourselves. So from that perspective, it's way more bang for your buck. And then you build deeper relationships with people because, we do our speakers dinner the night before, we do our table quiz the night of the event. It's just been really good for us. And obviously as a B2B tactic, I think building a community or being that platform for the community within your industry that you're selling to can be hugely valuable and usually affordable way to get up and running on the marketing side.
And what about outside funds then, and broader financial services? How are you trying to incorporate the same strategy across the different financial services sectors then?
Yeah, so as our product is evolving, it's, I guess, becoming more and more applicable to different verticals within financial services. So we're seeing it happen organically in that some of our, say, funds clients that also have insurance or, banking arm are starting to look to use our products in those other verticals, which is starting to build out, a set of case studies within each of them. So that's really how we're going to organically move across the different verticals. And then, we're seeing payments companies using our software, etc. So there's lots of scope for us to grow outside of the funds industry. We're launching a new version of our Fusion Data and Fusion Rex product next year that's going to be much more flexible. So we're really excited about that. And then, we're getting a good bit of traction on the regulatory side. Some of our regulatory related reconciliations that we're doing, especially around EMIR and SFTR and ASIC in Australia, they're getting more and more demand. So we're seeing a lot of interest in that. And I guess, it's often when there's a regulatory budget and deadline involved, it can help, quicken up that 6-month sales cycle significantly. So that's kind of the two big things that we're working on at the moment, is the regulatory side and then the new version of the platform that's more flexible.
Okay. And then you're obviously based in New York now. You've been there for a couple of years. When was your first kind of overseas deal? And did that happen by chance, or were you purposely looking to sort of export outside of Ireland?
Yeah, I guess it was a natural progression for us. So even from our first customers that were based in Dublin, they had international offices. So quite early on, within the first year, Fundrex was being used in Singapore or in the UK just naturally and organically by our customers. So that helped us get reference sites within those countries. And then, we've had folks just reach out to us that found us online from Australia and have signed deals. Some of it has been just organic through SEO. Others has been, people that have worked with our platform in one business, moved to another business, and then they bring us with them. So a lot of referral-based business. And then, I guess it kind of naturally follows financial services centers, which are pretty global. So if you think about it, like London, New York, Dublin, Luxembourg, Singapore, Australia, if you listed all the cities, there's probably like 20 cities that you could focus on. That would be our target market.
Okay, fair enough. And can we talk about hiring for a bit? Because I think, that's often overlooked when you're not paying, the big tech salaries. How do you make sure you're getting the right people? Because getting that wrong can be detrimental to a business as they're starting off.
Yeah, it's very important, especially in a startup where you can be recruiting from corporate companies. It's trying to find the people that have the right mindset. And sometimes it's a case of you're finding someone that there just isn't an opportunity for them to reach their full potential because they've been put in a narrow pigeonhole within the large financial institution they're in. So we look out for people that, enjoy problem solving. They're very collaborative. And a big part of it is, a focus on customer success. So we consider ourselves pretty good problem solvers in Fundrex. And a part of that comes back to, and I think it is kind of an Irish characteristic. We really want to see people happy and pleased. And the customer service side of that really shines through. So we look at hiring people from the fund sector, and they're working and servicing, fund managers globally. The ones that go the extra mile for their customers over time kind of gets reflected within our business. And, if they've a really strong focus on making the customer successful, that's what we're looking for a lot of the time.
Yeah. And have you hired typically out of funds and given them that opportunity to, be in a faster paced environment, or have you hired out of tech companies as well?
It's been a bit of both. So we've had, and this is like when we talk about competing with the large tech companies, we've had significant success hiring against West Coast companies where folks, get peed off at doing 10 p.m. calls Irish time. And they're like, this just doesn't work for me from a work-life family balance perspective. So we give them an opportunity to work for an Irish company, bringing across some of the same workflows and work patterns that they were doing with the US company, but on regular Irish hours. So that's been just a kind of a bit of an advantage that we've had with those types of businesses. And then outside of that, it's just giving the people an opportunity to, be successful as they can. So, here's a problem, go solve it. If you can solve that, then here's a bigger problem that you can look at. I think people enjoy that as well. And we very much will trust people first and say, here, this is the challenge that you have. I'll support you with any questions, but go figure it out yourself. And there's certain type of people I think that enjoy that autonomy and thrive under it, especially if they've been kind of held back a little bit in their prior roles.
It sounds like it hasn't been too much of a stress for you, I suppose, hiring, when most founders in your situation, it seems to be the biggest, but you seem very calm about it.
Yeah, I think we've had great success with hiring, and we've had great success with referrals from the team, and we've had good success with recruiters. And when we were very small, just hiring from our network of people that we worked with previously. So, we do tend to have good success with it. I think it's going to be more and more of a challenge as we scale up. So we're just over 50 people now next month. Going from 50 to 100 is going to, push us in terms of what we're doing. And I guess the key to it was probably Emma Bradley, who came on as our chief people officer just over a year ago, took a lot of this burden off me. It's probably one of the reasons why I look so calm is Emma does all the work.
Okay.
And she's been fantastic. So we hired her when we were pretty early. Like, I think we were just over 25 people.
That's very really early for a head of people.
Yeah, and really the feedback that we got from other folks was, probably the earlier you can get someone in, the better, because then we don't build up the bad habits. And Emma's been fantastic. Scaling up from the 25 to 50 people has been largely thankful to Emma's work.
Okay. And when do you want to get to 100 by, or, I'm sure it's going to be a need for it, but.
Yeah. So we're always focusing on doubling the business every year from a revenue, headcount, customer perspective. So, as we can find the right people and get the customers on as quick as we can, the goal will be to get to 100 people, as quick as we can, probably within the next 12 to 18 months. So yeah, we're doing a good bit of hiring next year. A lot of specialization will start to come into the business where we've, stuff that we couldn't focus on previously. When we look at the marketing team itself, bringing in a head of marketing and then bringing in specialized team underneath them, that's another 5 or 6 roles on its own. And then outside of that, the sales team will continue to grow. We've lots of projects we want to do on the software side that at the moment we might have half a headcount on, that realistically we could dedicate a team of 3 or 4 people to speed up. Okay. So I have a long list of things that I want to get done. And a lot of it is, customer led. They need help in a specific direction, or there's something coming up in the future that we're trying to pre-plan for and get ahead of. But yeah, there's so much work to be done. There's so much opportunity out there. People are trying to do more with less in terms of headcount. They're trying to be more efficient. And there still is a huge shortage of software developers to build everything themselves. So that's the opportunity that we have.
And would you look to remain hiring in Ireland for those, or are you looking across Europe or globally for that now?
Anywhere we can find talent that we can work with. So we work with an Irish firm you're probably familiar with, Boundless, and Boundless has helped us hire people outside of Ireland, and that's worked well. So as we've had people organically move abroad themselves, we've kind of been able to keep them within Fundrex, and then we've had 1 or 2 people that we've been able to hire outside of Ireland through Boundless. So I think the opportunity for us is going to be continue to be flexible with employees, where large financial institutions might struggle to offer the same flexibility, and then just try and find talent wherever we can find it, and then try and make it work in terms of pulling it all together. So big part of the challenge is trying to figure out how can we be efficient remotely, because we're fully remote at the moment, and we have an office in Dublin, Waterford, and New York, and some people are back in, but it's not everyone in. So trying to get that balance right, I think still ourselves and other businesses are trying to find what is the optimal way for us to be effective. So, trying to get back together in person as much as we can, and then balance that with being fully remote.
Okay. And then, let's say we're looking into the future and you need a cash injection to, fuel a specific part of your growth. Is the next step to kind of continue what you've done and go down the angel route, revisit a few of them? Or is there going to be a point when you maybe consider something bigger and perhaps that sort of Series A?
Yeah, for us, and it's something we're looking at the moment is, what is the appetite out there with investors doing a Series A? What does that look like? So yeah, we're openly exploring at the moment in terms of talking to investors. So it's definitely something we consider. And for us, it's all about trying to get to where we want to get to faster if we can.
Okay.
It's hard being customer funded because you stop and stutter in terms of your hiring because you're waiting for deals to close and customers to go live. Whereas the funding can give us a bit of a buffer to move faster and make those hires quicker. So that's really the reason behind looking at the moment.
Okay. And have you had to say no at any point up until now, or has it never been on the table?
Oh yeah, you get any startup founder these days with a company LinkedIn profile is probably getting, dozens of inbound investor emails each week. And I seen one of the VCs kind of post advice a couple of weeks ago saying it's best to ignore those inbound emails and only really go to an investor when you're ready to talk to them, because oftentimes they can just be generic messages to go out across a market, and they're just lead generating on their end. So yeah, no, we get some inbound interest. We built relationship with investors over the last few years. So, we're trying to find the right deal for us and the right timing and, the right terms. Okay.
Because it sounds like you've had a lot of autonomy between the 3 of you and the rest of your team up until now. And you hear that phrase, oh, now the real work starts when sort of institutional investment comes in. But you sound like you're prepared for that now. You're probably ready, maybe.
Yeah, I think we had a bit of an advantage in that we we were in the corporate world for a number of years. So, within Fundrex, we probably over governance or over complied, especially the customers that we have. Like we've had our accounts get audited each year. We do our SOC 2 or ISO. We do a bunch of security stuff. We have our regular board meetings and management meetings. So there is like quite a bit of infrastructure in place already that an investor can kind of slot into. And any investors that we work with, most of the time we've probably spoken to them at some stage and built a relationship with them already. So there's hopefully a meeting of minds in terms of what's expected. And then we speak to other founders and how they manage the investors as well, in terms of the board meetings and sharing information and trying to leverage them. Because, realistically, you're trying to find the value add from your investors. Like we've had great success with our angels. Like tangible example would have been we had a software engineer move from abroad and come to Ireland with his family in the last 6 months. Obviously, the housing market's been a nightmare. And he was moving to Waterford with literally, I think at one point, 0 rentals available.
My God.
So, when we would have given one of our investor updates, we just said, listen, anyone have any connections in property? And he was able to introduce us to an estate agent that ended up getting us sorted out with both short-term accommodation and permanent accommodation. So it's things like that you're looking at investors. Where can they help you?
That's real value.
That's real value.
Many investors are listening. Pay attention. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was real value. And then I can think of another example where one of our smaller investors, introduced us to a senior hire, and stuff like that where they can actually make a difference. And obviously if they've got customer connections, that's a huge one as well. So it's like trying to get those tangible benefits out of an investor, I think, is how you can make the relationship work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I mean, that's been great, Alan. And, there's lots of nuggets that you've shared, for any sort of founder out there might be thinking of doing it themselves, rather than seeking funding straight away. What's the next kind of couple of years looking like for Fundrex?
Yeah. So we're really excited about the regulatory solutions that we're putting out at the moment. That's going to be a big driver of the business in the next 12 months. And then also launching our new version of the data platform and the Rex platform next year. We're really excited about this, trying to get an end user end-to-end build workflows themselves. So those are 2 big things, really trying to get those products up and running and out the door, and customers using them and being happy with them and solving problems. So just continuing to grow the business and develop the product. Yeah.
Any end goal in sight, or is it very much a work in progress?
No, we have our own internal targets that we want to get to in terms of scale. We're still not there yet, and we have a lot of work to do to get there. But yeah, I think every time we've hit it like a little bit of a milestone, we've kind of reassessed what the goal is, and it's moved out for the finishing line has moved out further for us. So I think until we get to a point where we've explored, can we automate workflows for end users without any code, and see if we can manage to get that working, I think we'll keep pressing ahead with the business.
Okay. Good stuff. Well, look, Alan, thanks very much for joining us. And yeah, congrats to you and the rest of your team. You've been a great sort of success story, for Ireland, and yeah, all the best for the future.
Thanks a million, James. And if anyone's looking for me, they can find me at fundrex.com or alan@fundrex.com.
Brilliant. All right, Alan, thanks very much.
Super, James.
Cheers. Bye now.